Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Papadopoulos. I'm the director of the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, both for the online and in-class programs. Our third and final faculty speaker for today for our virtual open house is Jacqueline Steinert. Jacqueline is a certified nutritional practitioner from the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. She graduated with first-class distinction honors. And prior to her nutritional studies, she graduated with honors from Harvard University, majoring in economics with a citation in French, where she privately tutored in economics and mentored youth in an outdoor wilderness program. She also earned her basic diploma from Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, a catalyst for her love for food. Jacqueline has an extensive background in quantitative research and a diverse global background as well. Her husband and herself decided to relocate to Asia, where they experienced a myriad of cultures and cuisines. And through these incredible worldly experiences, as well as working with families, with children, seeking sustainable, healthful lifestyles, Jacqueline is excited to share her passion in empowering people with knowledge about nutrition and the IHN community. Jacqueline runs a thriving, busy private practice, JS Holistic Nutrition, which works with families and specialties ranging from childhood development, family meal preparation, hormonal health, inflammation, immunity, allergies, sensitivities, to name a few. She believes in the profound power of food to heal. Jacqueline regularly presents teaching children about the importance of sound nutrition at a young age. Jacqueline teaches advanced nutrition research, comparative diets, nutritional pathology, nutrition through the lifespan at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition's in-class and online programs. Let's welcome Jacqueline Steinert.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Elizabeth. And let me pull up my slides for you. Okay, perfect. So just as Elizabeth said, today I'm very excited to share with everyone optimal plant-based eating approaches. I did graduate from the North York campus at IHN. I had such an incredibly life-changing experience that I always wholeheartedly recommend that to everyone. And today what I am teaching is an excerpt of one of the courses that I teach there of comparative diets. As with all protocols that we speak about, you always want to consider your or your client's bio-individuality, as well as blood markers, genetics, family history, lifestyle, and priorities, as these are all unique for each person. What will we cover today? Today, I would like to speak to you about the importance of nutrition. We'll then venture into the definition of plant-based and reasons why somebody would go plant-based, which include ethical reasons, health reasons, and sustainable reasons that include economical and environmental reasons. We'll then explore what are the benefits to being plant-based, and on the flip side, what are the limitations? And on that note, how can we avoid nutritional deficiencies? We will close with what should your plate look like for an optimal plant-based diet? And at the end of the day, let's talk about what the priorities are. I will close then with questions and answers. So thank you so much for being here. So first off, why nutrition? You literally are what you eat. I like to think of food as fuel that signals information to your brain and your body. And given the importance of our diet, it is extremely important to choose our types of and quality of our foods intentionally and diligently. You might ask, well, why this picture of bees? Well, to further illustrate this point, I want you to consider bees. Did you know that queen bees are genetically exactly identical to worker bees? Queen bees, in fact, are fed an entirely different diet from their worker bees. And this is what is responsible for them being queen bees. They are fed royal jelly, which is rich in a compound known as royal lactin, from their inception as larvae until the day that they die. And it is this meal plan, this specific diet, that causes their physiology and their behavior to develop completely differently from the worker bees. As a result, they grow 1.5 times the size of the worker bees. They live for generations longer, and they are sexually mature, unlike worker bees who cannot mate. And they ultimately have drastically different behaviors from the other bees in the hive, purely because of their diet. So clearly, nutrition matters. The next question you might want to ask is, what should we eat? Let's explore what plant-based means. So the Oxford Dictionary defines plant-based of food or a diet as consisting largely or solely of vegetables, grains, pulses, or other foods derived from plants. Wikipedia defines plant-based as a diet consisting mostly or entirely of plant-based foods, which are foods derived from plants with no animal source foods or artificial ingredients. And while a plant-based diet avoids or has limited animal products, it is not necessarily vegan, which means strictly no animal products. Now that we have explored the definition of what plant-based means, let's pose a really important question. Why do most people choose to limit their consumption of meat and go plant-based? So the first reason that I want to explore today are ethics. Let me give you a fact. Farm animals face extreme confinement and painful mutilations. There are numerous documentaries that document this, not mutually exclusive, but I've listed a couple here. Forks Over Knives in 2011, What the Health in 2017, and Cowspiracy in 2014. What do I mean by ethics? Let's look at specific animals. Egg-laying hens. 4 hens are permanently confined in 16 by 18 cages. This is analogous to 4 human beings living inside one elevator. Their stress leads to aggression that is manifest in abundant pecking, and the industry tries to control this by de-beaking the birds. This means amputating them without anesthetics. Let's move on to one of my favorite animals, which are pigs. Did you know that piglets are the 5th most intelligent species? So the argument that some people make that animals don't have feelings, they're not intelligent, is null and void here. Pigs' tails are clipped, so they do not tail bite, and the males are castrated. Females are confined to crates where they cannot turn around, and this really stresses their legs and their hooves. And a University of Guelph found that 30% of growing pigs suffer from ulcers, and even worse, between 10 to 40% may eventually die from this ailment. Let's look at cows. Dairy cows in Ottawa during the winter months are chained by the neck for 23 hours a day. And calves are confined to stalls that restrict their movement, and they often develop anemia due to a reduction in iron. Beef cattle are stripped from their mothers at a very young age, where they're taken to barren feedlots and lined up side by side in extremely cramped quarters. And in a more general sense, every year when summer arrives, severe heat stress wipes out hundreds of thousands of these animals. In fact, pigs and chicken are housed in sweltering indoor quarters. And another fact is that pigs have no sweat glands. They cannot sweat, and they end up suffocating and gasping for air. Besides heat, the transport of these animals is also very deadly. They are crippled in transit, dragged alive from trucks by chain or rope, exposed to extreme heat in livestock rigs that are not equipped with air cooling systems, face food and water deprivation. In fact, federal regulations allow for them to be without these for 36 to 72 hours. They are in overcrowded conditions. And in Ontario, roughly 7,000 animals arrive at the provincial slaughter plants already crippled. Lastly, on the point of ethics, Their slaughter is grossly inhumane. They are improperly stunned. Crippled animals are dragged. Their deaths are lingering. There's castration without anesthetics, catheterizing of conscious animals, bashing with wooden boards, terrified, stressed animals tied up, and animals that are awake with ineffective throat cutting. And finally, a study in Milan confirmed that this fear that these animals experience during their breeding and their inhumane slaughter significantly elevates the animal's levels of stress hormones. That is their adrenaline, their cortisol, and other steroids, which then carnivores will consume. And these stress hormones will alter the protein composition, the vitamin content, and the minerals, which transitions us to something, a huge component that we're interested in, which is health. Another critical reason to avoid a lot of meat consumption and to eat plant-based is for health. In fact, eating excessive meat can cause illness. Let's look at why. Our human molar teeth are designed for grinding and chewing, not tearing animal flesh. We also have long intestines in which the meat will putrefy. And this putrefaction causes indoles and scattles and pathogenic bacteria. Excess meat consumption thereby causes indigestion, which can cause bad odors, and saturated fat will cause clogging of the arteries and heart disease. In fact, meat consumption is very high in cholesterol and contributes to chronic disease, including obesity. On the flip side, on a more positive note, the benefits of a plant-based diet can include increased energy, clearer skin, fewer headaches, improved detoxification, weight loss, improved bowel movements, gut microbiome diversity with the consumption of more fiber, and more efficient digestion. Yes, please. In fact, the clinical benefits of a plant-based diet are reported by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that plant-based eaters are at lower risk for developing heart disease, colorectal, ovarian, and breast cancer, diabetes, obesity, and hypertension, also known as high blood pressure. To illustrate the power of eating plants, let me share with you the results of a recent study from the New England Journal of Medicine published in a Harvard Gazette article called Skip the Salt and Grab the Bananas by Nicole Rua. For every 1,000 milligram increase in sodium consumption, did you know that the risk of cardiovascular disease increases by up to 18%? On the flip side, a 1,000 milligram increase in potassium offers an 18% risk reduction of cardiovascular disease. So in other words, what I'm saying is sodium down, potassium up. Now, where do we find sodium and where do we find potassium? Sodium is naturally found in some foods, but those high dangerous amounts are frequently found in commercially processed, packaged, prepared foods. In other words, the foods that are not along the perimeter of the grocery store, but rather down the aisles in boxes on shelves. In fact, the US FDA recently released guidance to reduce sodium, which has been linked with increased blood pressure in commercially produced foods over the next few years. That is how high the sodium content is. On the flip side, potassium, which is very beneficial, is found in fruits, leafy greens, beans, nuts, dairy, and starchy vegetables like winter squash. And potassium helps relax our blood vessels and increases the excretion of sodium while decreasing our blood pressure. So clearly, plant-based has its benefits. Let's look at the mechanism as to why these plants are healthier. I really do look at plants as healing, powerful medicine without the negative side effects. Plants boast a high nutrient density per serving. In fact, plants have phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. They really can be thought of as these medicinal compounds that prevent disease. They are very high in fiber, which means you feel more full and thereby satisfied, which leads to weight loss and controlled obesity. And it's advantageous to our gut microflora because it's very rich in soluble fiber. Plants also lower our serum lipid value. It gives a lower risk of hypoglycemia because it helps us manage our blood sugar and helps make us regular, which reduces constipation as well as bowel toxicity and consequently bowel and colon cancer. Plant-based also tends to have less of a risk of pesticides. In other words, plants tend to have a lower contamination. Animals are quite fatty, and there's a bioaccumulation of non-polar chemicals. In other words, pesticides. These are persistent toxins binding to fat, which we find in a lot of animal meats, and they're fat soluble, especially in foods like meat and dairy, where they can accumulate. However, when we talk about plants, and if you are consuming an abundance of them, one important measure is to try to buy organic, especially when we talk about the dirty dozen. And I'm about to address that. With the exception of olive oil, olive leaves contain a natural medicinal antimicrobial, so there's no need to buy organic there. Let's talk about the whole discussion of organic versus conventional. So there's an organization called the Environmental Working Group. And every year they identify what are the 12 dirtiest fruits and vegetables. And on the flip side, what are the cleanest 15. Now, when we talk about organic, a lot of times, one of the criticisms about buying organic is that it can be very expensive. And so what I do say is, number one, when you are looking at fruits and vegetables, focus on buying the clean 15, the conventional form, and then save that extra money to buy the dirty dozen in the organic form. And there's also a lot of different preparation techniques, which I will share with you to help mitigate the pesticide residue. So the dirty dozen that the EWG goes through each year are identified as the 12 dirtiest fruits and veggies with the most pesticide residue. In fact, EWG testing revealed that 90% of strawberries contained at least one pesticide, and 30% of the crop had traces of 10 or more different toxins. You might ask, well, what happens if you do eat these residues? Well, negative effects include adverse impacts on our reproduction, our immune system, and nervous systems, which can cause cancer and lead to other extremely serious problems. But let's look at the flip side. There are 15 extremely clean fruits and vegetables that the EWG also identifies. So these are the 15 cleanest fruits and veggies that have the least pesticide residue. In fact, 70% of the clean 15 samples had no pesticide residue. So it's reasonably safe to buy the conventional version when it comes to these products. Another tip I like to share is you can also prepare, wash, and scrub your fruits and vegetables to help get rid of those residues. You can use a baking soda solution where you take 1 teaspoon of baking soda to 2 cups of water, and you can submerge and soak because the alkalinity of the baking soda is going to neutralize many acidic pesticides. I also recommend sometimes a lemon juice solution, vinegar, or a produce wash. And then you can also use a fresh produce brush and use that friction to loosen and eliminate those residues. Lastly, you want to dry your fruits and vegetables so that they don't spoil. So going plant-based has very consistently clean clinical results. In fact, Sandra Lamotte, in a recent CNN article, reported that eating plant-based fats lowers stroke risk. In fact, vegetable-based fats had a 12% less likelihood to experience a stroke compared to those who ate the least. And on the flip side, people who ate the highest level of animal-based saturated fats were 16% more likely to experience a stroke than those who ate the least fat of that kind. Clearly, plants yield great health benefits, which brings us to our third reason to go plant-based. And this is sustainability. And as I said, sustainability can mean economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. Let's first talk about economical sustainability. Plant-based diets are a cheaper, more cost-effective way to feed humans. In other words, fruits and vegetables are generally much more affordable than meat and fish. In fact, Tyson and Kraft Heinz recently notified their retail customers that they are raising prices this upcoming January for frozen and refrigerated meats, as reported by CNN. Prices for higher-end meats like steak, veal, and pork chops have surged over the past year. Meat producers are hiking prices, and they're reducing promotions on items because they are trying to combat rising costs for commodities, packaging, labor, transportation, and other inputs. In fact, Tyson reported that they are carefully managing these inflationary pressures through pricing actions and efforts to reduce costs. And another food distributor called Conagra said that the sustained increase in packaging ingredients will require the company to raise prices on their meats. They continue to face accelerating levels of extraordinary inflation, which necessitates additional pricing actions. As reported by CNN's Nathaniel Mayerson in his article, even hot dogs, burgers, and deli meats will soon get expensive. So economically, going veggie is a lot more sustainable, but environmentally as well. Environmentally, plant-based is a lot more sustainable. In fact, did you know that a chicken breast takes over 735 liters of water to produce? The equivalent to 735 liters of water is 4.6 times a bathtub full of water. Let me give you another way to visualize this. So let's think about 1 pound of beef versus 1 pound of soybeans. That 1 pound of beef takes 1,800 to 5,000 gallons of water to produce, whereas that 1 pound of soybeans takes 257 gallons. So 1,800 to 5,000 gallons versus 257 gallons of water. Clearly, plants are more environmentally sustainable. The carbon footprint of a vegetarian diet is roughly that of a meat lover's diet. Limiting our seafood consumption as well will allow our oceans to restore to their natural balance. And restricting meat will slow our consumption of the planet's natural resources as our Earth replenishes them. And my last bullet point, this is my son's favorite, is that cows produce something called methane when they digest and when they burp and when they fart. And this is a potent greenhouse gas whose emission has a warming potential that is greater 28 times that of carbon dioxide. David Attenborough, who is a famous conservationist, made a film called A Life on Our Planet, where he describes how rapidly our planet has been ravaged by humans since he began filming with animals in the 1950s. He says, quote, "We must change our diet. The planet cannot support billions of meat eaters. If we had a mostly plant-based diet, we could increase the yield of the land. The wilder and more diverse, the more effective. Nature is our biggest ally. Anna Lappé, who wrote the book Diet for a Hot Planet, also emphasizes how the food life cycle is connected to climate change. And she explains that we as the reader must understand, number one, the food life cycle from its roots in the ground to going back to the ground as waste. And number two, we are not bystanders. Now that we've spoken about the great benefits to going plant-based, let's address the fact that there are some limitations. One of the most common criticisms to going mostly plant-based are that your plant eater may run into some nutritional deficiencies, including deficiencies in vitamin B12, protein, iron, zinc, calcium, and vitamin D. I want to first focus on vitamin B12. Why B12? So we synthesize B12 with our intestinal bacteria. However, we synthesize an amount that is insufficient to supply our daily needs. Thus, we do need to find B12 elsewhere, and it is primarily found in animal products, including even insects, such as beetles. One thing that is important to note, however, is that our daily needs are actually very small. An average healthy adult requires only 0.6 to 1.2 micrograms. B12 is extremely important. B12 helps our red blood cells to form and grow. And a deficiency in B12, which is called pernicious anemia, can lead to very grave, serious consequences. For example, extremely chronic pernicious anemia can cause the spinal cord to degenerate. Now, cases of deficiency in B12 can arise not only from low intake of B12, but also from poor absorption. So it is important to note that to absorb B12, you require sufficient gastric acid to release that B12, coupled with the presence of a protein called intrinsic factor. So you definitely want to rectify an imbalance, and to do so, you can take sublingual B12 or injections, but this is not a long-term solution. You want to address the intrinsic factor that we spoke about first with total amino acids. An intrinsic factor is a glycoprotein in our stomach that will combine with the B12 to transport and bind and absorb it. An intrinsic factor is produced by our gastric parietal cells, and it is secreted when the pathways stimulate the stomach to make the protein. You also want to get your sources of B12. And one common misconception is that you can only get B12 from animal sources. In fact, B12 can come from fermented products because the fermentation increases this B12 content dramatically because there is a bacterium present alongside the fermenting mold. So you would be pleased to hear that you can actually find B12 rich source in fermented products such as sauerkraut, pickles, miso, sourdough bread, and natural beer, as well as in sea vegetables, whole grains, and fortified soy drinks and supplements. I have a handy cheat sheet here for you. And looking at this chart, which shows where you can find B12, we can clearly see, yes, in beef liver, you have a very, very rich source of B12. You have 31 micrograms per 100 grams, but recall that an average healthy adult only needs 0.6 to 1.2 micrograms per day. So by simply, having a meal of tempeh with a wakame salad on the side, you would get a sufficient level of B12. And tempeh is delicious. It is a fermented soy that really takes on this meaty texture and the flavor of whatever you cook it with. So you could do some sort of Asian version with soy and rice vinegar, or a lot of people like to make tempeh with apple cider vinegar and sometimes maple syrup or sriracha. So a lot of options here for plant eaters to get their diverse, rich sources of B12. Another important nutrient to consider when you're going plant-based is your protein. So specifically, you need to focus on how well the amino acid profile of a protein matches the body's requirements and how well the body can utilize that protein. So in short, we need 9 essential amino acids, which I will show you in a minute. And if food is low or missing in one of those amino acids, then we say that the usability of that protein is limited. In other words, if a plant protein possesses a limiting essential amino acid, one that is low or missing, then we call that plant protein incomplete. However, there are many exceptions, which we will talk about. So compare this with most animal proteins, which are deemed as complete. However, like I said, there are always exceptions, and plant proteins that are considered whole, in other words, they host all 9 essential amino acids, include quinoa, spinach, and soy. And in terms of animal protein, not all of them are considered whole. Chicken is actually considered an incomplete animal protein because chicken has a limited source of valine, which is one of those 9 essential amino acids. So what is the risk of becoming deficient in protein? Someone who is deficient in protein would have symptoms such as weak hair, poor skin, slow wound healing, impaired eyesight, suppressed immune system, and a lack of digestive enzymes. So how do we go about avoiding this deficiency? Like I said, you want to make sure that you are eating all 9 of those essential amino acids. So looking at this chart, it's very handy because the column on the left that is titled essential, we have our histidine, our isoleucine, our leucine, our methionine, our phenylalanine, our threonine, our tryptophan, our valine, and our lysine. These are those 9 essential amino acids that you want to diligently make sure you have. Now, we've said that plant proteins can be incomplete because a single plant protein, not including quinoa, spinach, or soy, because those are great, those are complete on their own, but other plant proteins might be low or missing one of those 9 essential amino acids. In contrast, most animals, with the exception of chicken, do have all 9 essential amino acids. So what do you do? The answer here is we combine. By combining plant protein, we can reach a complete protein. That is our workaround. And this is known as protein complementation. In other words, protein complementation is combining plant protein sources to achieve a better amino acid balance than either would have in isolation. I love this little cheat sheet. If you combine grains, for example, with legumes, or legumes with nuts, or legumes with seeds, you will then be able to match that lower missing amino acid with another source, and thereby you will have a complete protein. Let me explain this more. So this came about from Francis Moore Lappé in 1971, who introduced the idea of food combining, not for digestion, but rather to achieve that superior protein quality. And this is called protein combining. In other words, if one food has limited essential amino acids, we complement that with the amino acids of another food. And traditional societies practice this food combining all the time. In fact, food combining for complete protein is not a scientific system. Rather, it is a natural, traditional way of eating that cultures have been practicing for years. Look at all the traditional cuisines. And in some of these traditional cuisines, there is a balance of 70% whole grains to 30% legumes. Sometimes that's 80%, 20%, but we can look at it expressed in 3 distinctly different regions. For example, in Latin America, where they have beans with tortillas or rice. In the Middle East, where they combine bulgur wheat with chickpeas or pita falafel with hummus. And then let's not forget in Asia, where you can find soy with rice in southern China, northern Japan, and Indonesia, soy with wheat or millet in northern China, and soy with barley in Korea and southern China. So this really has been practiced traditionally by many different societies. Let's look at 2 different versions of combining proteins, and I'll explain to you what the priority would be when you do these. So the first one I want to talk about is true complementation. This is when we have 2 incomplete proteins. This means they're either limited in an essential amino acid or they're missing one, and we combine these 2. And the premise is that the quality of that combination is superior to the protein quality of the individual items alone. If we combine them properly, we are left with a synergistic effect. And now you want to ideally eat them at the same meal, but your body does have an amino acid pool with reserves of 2 to 3 days. So there is a bit of flexibility there. There is another version of complementation, and this one's called partial complementation. So instead of me taking 2 incomplete proteins, I'm going to take a complete protein, such as milk or soy, and I will combine it with that incomplete protein. Again, that is a protein missing or having limited essential amino acids. And the ultimate result is that the quality of that combined protein will not exceed the protein quality of the individual complete protein, the milk or the soy. However, the objective here is that you are raising the protein quality of the incomplete protein. And the idea here is that you can nourish more people. So for example, I could take soy and mix it with rice, tofu and rice, or I could take milk and mix it with a grain such as cereal. And if I raise the protein quality of my incomplete protein until it's a 50-50 threshold, then I can nourish many more people than if they were to just consume the tofu or the milk. So partial complementation is just a more sustainable way to nourish more people. And in practice, the complete protein, the tofu, the milk, should not be the dominating quantity on the plate. So we've learned different ways to combine proteins to reach a better amino acid profile. Just to walk you through a specific example, if you look at wheat, wheat is low in the essential amino acids, threonine and lysine. However, beans are high in lysine and spinach is high in threonine. So if we make a slice of toast and we saute some spinach and garnish that with some beans, you then have a complete protein meal, right? So it's extremely easy and beneficial to your health. Another helpful cheat sheet, you can mix some legumes with nuts and seeds or grains, and then you get your complete protein. So these are ways to avoid a deficiency in your 9 essential amino acids. Now, plant eaters are also sometimes deficient in other nutrients. And there is a specific reason for this. Another reason for these deficiencies is called anti-nutrients. What are anti-nutrients? So these are defense mechanisms that plant compounds have. They're powerful chemicals that the plants have to cause a negative effect in their predators. So for example, out in the field, they have these defense mechanisms. So if a pest comes to eat them, the pest is going to be steered away because he or she doesn't want to experience these negative effects. However, when we then eat these crops, then we experience the negative effects as well, which are gut discomfort, widespread inflammation, and they ultimately interfere with the absorption of nutrients, thereby causing havoc on those who eat them. These anti-nutrients are specifically lectins, phytates, and oxalates. And these are compounds that block out our ability to absorb things such as calcium, magnesium, that also enter our bloodstream, bind to certain cells, and trigger immune responses that cause cellular damage, inflammation, and a host of negative, unwanted symptoms. So how do we work around this? You need your diversity of your plant foods, as well as some preparation techniques that I will walk you through. So these grains and legumes, they have these naturally containing anti-nutrients, which include the lectins, the oxalates, and the phytic acids. And according to Weston A. Price, indigenous cultures that he studied would soak, sprout, and ferment their grains. And this will increase the bioavailability of the nutrients and eliminate these anti-nutrients. So anti-nutrients, they can be found in the raw form of these grains and legumes. And like I said, they bind to our important minerals, including calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc. So it is important for us to prepare them correctly so that they do not impede that nutrient absorption. What are these anti-nutrients? So like I said, they're commonly found in wheat, soybeans, nuts, legumes. Phytates are commonly found on the nuts and the legumes, oxalates on spinach and buckwheat, to name a few, and lectins on tomatoes and potatoes. How do we minimize them? So to minimize these anti-nutrients, you want to practice a couple of techniques. You want to soak your food in water overnight because the anti-nutrients are water soluble and they will dissolve. You also could sprout your grains and legumes to make the nutrients more bioavailable. And when we say sprout, what this means is you're placing the soaked food in a glass jar, like a mason jar or a sprouting vessel, and you rinse them every 12 hours until sprouts appear. You can also ferment so that the natural bacteria and the yeast degrade the anti-nutrients. Boil as the high temperatures destroy the anti-nutrients. And peel and de-seed your grains and legumes. Remove the skin and the seeds because that will also remove some of those anti-nutrients. And you can also combine and mix and match the above processes. So again, you want to soak. You want to fully submerge, leave it overnight, and sprout, which also makes them more digestible. So some of the nutrients that these anti-nutrients can impede the absorption of include zinc, for one. So zinc is very important as it can lead to a host of unwanted symptoms if you are deficient. These include a depressed immune system. Now, zinc is also used to make happiness chemical serotonin. So a deficiency can lead to depression. It can also lead to slow wound healing, infertility in males, and a loss of taste and smell. So you really want to focus on preparing your foods correctly and also eating a diversity-rich source of zinc, which includes nuts, seeds, legumes, and mushrooms. If you were to take zinc as a supplement as well, which we will address later on, you would want to take, chelated gluconate and make sure that it is also with copper because zinc can displace copper. And when I say chelated gluconate, that simply refers to the zinc is bound to gluconic acid, which makes it more absorbable, more bioavailable to your body, so it can utilize those nutrients. Some more sources of zinc Obviously, a lot of these are animal sources, but you can find zinc in your tofu, your hemp seeds, your lentils, your oatmeal, and your shiitake mushrooms. So quite a big range for plant eaters as well. Now, another important nutrient that some plant eaters may risk deficiency of are our omega-3s. And these include our EPA and our DHA. So plant-based sources of omega-3s include avocados, algae, and nuts and seeds, including flax and chia. So one important note is that when you are getting your omega-3s, you have your short chain alpha linolenic acid, and that can get converted into long chain EPA and DHA, which is more bioavailable. Again, your body can utilize it better. Algae is a plant-based source that is very rich in EPA and DHA. In fact, this is why fish are a great source of EPA and DHA, because they eat this algae. When you are getting your omega-3s from the other sources, such as flaxseed, which is a very important vegetarian source of omega-3, just remember that that needs to be converted from its alpha linolenic acid into EPA and DHA. And this conversion can be challenging. Women only convert 9% and men only convert 0 to 4% into DHA. So you want to get your diversity of sources there. So at the end of the day, we might ask, is being plant-based healthy? One of my favorite authors, Anne-Marie Colbin, has very special insight. She wrote Food and Healing, and she says, there are, incidentally, few eating habits as damaging as strict vegetarianism or veganism, which means no animal protein, no milk products, when combined with the frequent use of refined sugar. So yes, plant-based, we talked about all of those clinical benefits. It is also, a more humane way of life for animals, more sustainable. However, it depends on how you do it. If you are instead binging on refined, processed, carbs and sugar, then it's not as healthy. So the question you want to ask is, what does plant-based look like? Does it look like a fresh salad bursting with herbs? Or is it simply meatless, processed grilled cheese sandwiches, right? You could have a meatless dish, which is, a fresh chickpea salad garnished with all sorts of beautiful rainbow antioxidant rich herbs and garnishes. But did you know that Oreos are meatless? And so are the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Meat Burger. So clearly it depends on how you do it. Let's talk about these substitutes of meat, which do fall under the plant-based category, and whether those are healthy or not. Let's look at the Beyond Burger. And so one of the first fundamental things that we learn about in comparative diets is whole foods versus fragmented foods. And whole foods are as close to nature, as unaltered as possible. These are the foods you really do find on the perimeter of the grocery store that are fresh. The Beyond Burger is so far from that. It literally has a list of ingredients greater than the number of fingers on my hand. Some of them I cannot even pronounce, right? So if plant-based includes eating these substitutions that are fragmented and refined, then it's certainly not necessarily a healthier route. There is also a competitor to Beyond Burger, and this is called Impossible Whopper. Now, this is literally impossible for me to grasp. The Impossible Whopper contains soy protein concentrate that has been sprayed with Roundup weed killer, a chemical known to cause cancer. And Impossible Whopper also includes a new ingredient called soy legumoglobin, which is a newly invented genetically modified protein. So there's two components here, very dangerous components that I want to address. Number one, the Impossible Burger was tested and they found that it had 11 times higher the glyphosates than even its competitor, the Beyond Meat burger, right? And glyphosates have been found to be carcinogenic. The other component I want to talk about is that other genetically modified protein, the soy legumoglobin. You might ask, why do they even add it? So soy legumoglobin, it is a genetically modified heme that resembles the blood that pours out when you cut a beef patty. So that is why they've added it to the Impossible Burger, because they really want it to resemble the same experience. However, the Center for Food Safety has challenged the FDA's approval of this additive with the complaint that the FDA conducted no long-term animal studies for cancer, reproductive impairment, and adverse health consequences. So that is what people are eating when they are eating these substitutes. In the New York Times, Dr. Frank Hu, who is the chairman of nutrition at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, declared that yes, studies have shown that replacing red meat with nuts, legumes, other plant foods can lower mortality and chronic disease risk. However, it is not possible to extrapolate that processed burgers, these substitutes that are springing up on the market, made with purified soy or pea protein, will have the same health benefits. This was in an article by Anahad O'Connor in December of 2020 in the New York Times. So when we talk about plant-based, we know not what to include, right? What do we include? Healthy plant-based includes high quality protein. Protein is critical. They are the building blocks for our enzymes, as well as our immune system antibodies to fight infection and build healthy blood and hormones. And these sources include nuts, seeds, legumes, and we can also garnish these with whole eggs or organic full-fat dairy, and if needed, supplement it with pond meat, which includes sparingly seafood, preferably wild, and grass-finished or pasture-raised or wild game. We also, besides protein, want to incorporate our high-quality fats, which I believe Anita just spoke to you about in fundamentals. So every one of our cells is made of fat, as are our nerve coverings and our hormones. In fact, fat regulates our inflammation, our blood sugar, and absorbs key nutrients. Our cells and metabolism simply run better on fats. When we talk about fats, we really want to focus on the quality of our fats, not the quantity. We as human beings went from high fat, high fiber, low carb, if we think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors, to today, where we're on the SAD diet of high carb, low fat, low fiber. But fat has always been the preferred optimal fuel for all of human evolution. These omega-3s that we refer to are really like powerful medicine without those side effects. They lower inflammation, promote cardiovascular health, protect our brain, and help prevent chronic disease such as metabolic syndrome. In fact, there was a Leon Diet heart study that discovered that increasing omega-3 fat intake while decreasing omega-6 reduced heart attacks by 70%, protected against cancer, and lowered mortality rates. And again, we can find these omega-3s in plant-based foods such as avocados, flax, algae, nuts, and other seeds such as chia and hemp. And lastly, I really want you to incorporate in your plant-based protocol colors. And I don't mean Skittles, I mean antioxidants, phytochemicals, and fiber. In fact, a study from the American Academy of Neurology showed that adding color to your plate may reduce your risk of cognitive decline by 20%. This study examined 77,000 people over 2 decades and discovered that those who ate just a serving daily of foods that are high in flavonoids, think of strawberries, capsicums, had 20% less risk of cognitive decline. Now, if half a serving of flavonoid-rich foods has the powerful an impact, imagine a plant-heavy rainbow diet every single day. Think green tea, blueberries, pecans, kale, cocoa. Absolutely delicious. Sadly, our ancestors, who ate more than 800 varieties of plant foods, would see that today, 15 crops make up 90% of our food intake. And globally, 3 crops make up 2/3 of our calories. These are wheat, corn, and rice, which are also heavily sprayed with toxic chemicals. You really want to incorporate colors. In fact, a study showed that those who consume at least 30 different types of plants per week have much more diverse microbiomes than those who consume only 10 or fewer. In fact, happy gut, happy immune system, happy gut-brain axis. When you consume that diversity of foods, you are taking in a variety of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and fiber. And this fuels your gut flora and synergistically will work to optimize your health. You will also reach homeostasis because if one supply of one nutrient is interrupted from another source, you then still have a wealth of other sources when you do diversify your diet, rendering you in a stable homeostasis. So we've talked about what macros that I want you to incorporate. Let me list a couple of specific superfoods that are really rich in these vitamins and minerals. Nutrient-dense sea vegetables. We have natto, which is a fermented soy abundant in K2 and B12, which we talked about. Nutritional yeast, which is very high in our B vitamins. We have soaked and sprouted nuts, legumes, whole grains, seeds. Mushrooms, which are high in beta-glucans, especially our shiitake and maitake. We have sesame seeds, tahini seeds, chia seeds, hemp, which is that perfect omega-3 to 6 ratio, flax, and delicious sesame, kale and sweet potatoes, which are abundant in vitamin A, our diversity of leafy greens, which are high in magnesium and fiber, our fermented foods and vinegars rich in probiotics and B vitamins, raw cocoa powder, which boasts, wonderful antioxidants, quinoa, which is a complete protein as well as rich in choline, and of course, nutrient-dense sprouts. Sometimes we want to supplement as an insurance policy. So some of those top supplements are algae, which we said is a vegan source of those long chain usable EPA and DHA. We have vitamin D3, a plant-based source comes from lichen. B12, which we can take as liposomal, which is more bioavailable. We have spirulina and chlorella. These are great proteins. 60% of them is usable. They're rich in phytonutrients, as well as chlorophyll, which is rich in our B vitamins, iron, and all of the essential amino acids. We have zinc gluconate chelated. Again, that just means that it's bound to gluconic acid, which is a compound, and that renders it easier for our body to absorb and utilize. And our fermented plant protein powder, which is high in our B vitamins, our protein, and more easily digestible. So at the end of the day, it's clear that reducing meat will reduce our disease. A study done by the American Heart Association Scientific Sessions in 2021 found that unsaturated fats from vegetables, nuts, and fatty fish lower our cholesterol levels and keep us healthy. And in contrast, saturated and trans fats are generally not as healthy. Dr. Frank Hugh, again, the T.H. Chan School of Public Health chair, says that a moderate reduction in red and processed meat consumption within a healthy eating pattern can reduce total mortality by 13%, heart disease mortality by 14%, cancer mortality by 11%, and type 2 diabetes risk by 24%. So I want to close by posing a question to you all. which is what is the worst thing that you can eat? And after today, you might say, well, is it inflammatory sugar or dairy? Or is it alcohol? Maybe it's gluten. So today I want to tell you that the worst thing you can eat is guilt. Whatever you choose to eat, you should feel good about it. Savor it. Enjoy it. Do not just restrict or limit foods without knowing the why. You want to eat plants, but do so for ethical or health or sustainable reasons, or all of the above. At the end of the day, you want to listen to your body. You want to cook and eat the foods that nourish and fulfill you. And if you do eat a food that does not serve you, let it go and move on. Do not punish yourself. Simply use that as a lesson, as information for what to eat next time. Anne-Marie Colvin, author of Food and Healing, says we can approach food as our ally, our teacher, and our rudder. It will nourish us well if well chosen, and if incorrectly chosen, it will teach us some lessons about our body that we may or may not heed. If we make mistakes in our selection of food, either perversely or in ignorance, we will have to pay for it. So why feel guilty on top of that? The results of our eating choices, if negative, should be considered information, not punishment. And the way that we do respond and negatively associate the food will literally change how we digest and the nutrients that we absorb. We're all unique. We all have unique bioindividuality, which dictates why these certain foods work for some of us and not for others. And at the end of the day, you want to love yourself, honestly find out what your body loves, and nourish yourself with that positivity. So to recap, we did discuss nutrition and what plant-based means, the benefits, the limitations, how to mitigate these limitations, and what our plate should look like at the end of the day. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. That was a wonderful presentation on plant-based eating and diet approaches. Thank you so much. Very thorough, spectacular slides and excellent recommendations. So we have a question here. I have understood that even organic produce has chemicals on them. Can you clarify this and how they are much better?
Absolutely, great question. So yes, I mean, some organic foods, it might have that runoff, or it could have, some of those residues, which is why even when you are purchasing the organic foods, always recommend that you are soaking it in, a diluted apple cider vinegar or lemon or produce wash, or like we said, the baking soda, which is alkaline. But at the end of the day, number one, buying organic, the organic does have those regulations, which does minimize the way that they grow it does minimize the pesticide residue. So you are getting the value there. But at the end of the day, some people do have those cost-effective restrictions. And of course, it's better to eat conventional strawberries than none at all, right? So I would say, you pick your battles. You can, buy the clean 15 and rest assured that they are, 70% of those samples have no pesticide residue. But if you are going to buy the conventional form, you just want to make sure that you prepare it adequately to try to minimize that residue.
Fantastic. Question here. I eat roasted almonds and roasted peanuts. What would be the effect on the nutritional content versus non-roasted?
Yeah. So when it's raw, it does contain, high levels of those anti-nutrients. When you heat them, it can, make it a bit more pro-inflammatory, but the heat also denatures those anti-nutrients. So what I would say is, a good compromise is if you could soak them before you roast them. If that is the form that you choose to eat them, you could also sprout them, dry roast them, and, a diversity in it. Maybe you can eat a mix of, the soaked, sprouted broth, and then some of your roasted version as well. So absolutely, they're delicious. I understand that. But I always say, a diversity and the preparation techniques is great.
Excellent. Yeah, because they are consuming rancid oils if that's all they're if all they're eating is the roasted nuts, then they're going to get a ton of rancid oil. So definitely try the raw ones, and then it's you actually prefer them after. So for sure. What is your opinion on using protein powder? What brand company would you recommend?
So protein powders, number one, again, I still apply the principle of diversity. I don't think you should just stick to one and have it, every single day. I think it's great to have a diversity of them. And another thing is I would just make sure that you're getting, a well-vetted, organic, high quality protein powder. I know that Botanica makes some great ones, Organica makes some great ones. And the other thing is, I know one of the questions before I spoke was about co-op, is that one of the benefits of co-op is a lot of people choose to work in the health food stores in the supplement department. And a lot of times when I'm talking to students, I'm learning from them because they'll say, yeah, so I'm at the Big Carrot, I'm or wherever, and we have this, and this, and they're great. Or they'll, talk to all of these different supplement companies who will come and give them, free samples and presentations, and you learn a lot that way. So I would say, number one, you want to get high quality, well vetted, and you don't want to just stick to one. You want to kind of rotate them, or when you finish that jug, make sure you get a different brand.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It was wonderful to have you on with us today. Beautiful presentation. And again, if you want to catch Jacqueline, she does teach our comparative, our symptomatology, lifespan, nutrition research,
and lifespan.
and the nutrition through the lifespan. So blessed to have you, Jacqueline. Enjoy the rest of your wonderful Saturday. And thank you to everyone for attending our open house today. For our January semester, please connect with us under our Contact Us page on our in-class website and our online website, and we would be absolutely delighted to provide you with an information session and review our entire program with you. Thank you, everyone.